I know what it's like to be overlooked, dismissed, disconnected, living in a place where I'm swirling in my shame, flooded in my fear, drowning in my doubt, and completely stuck. I also know what it looks like on the other side of doing the hard work. The work that most people want to avoid, but ultimately is going to give us the most freedom in everything that we do.
Who doesn't want to be a great leader? A leader who's calm under pressure, insightful, respected, well-liked. But what does it take to become a great leader? Hey, I'm Boo, and welcome to my podcast. The Few Leadership Podcast defines great leadership and what great leadership looks like. And I've found some of the world's best leaders or experts in the field of leadership to help you accelerate your leadership journey so you can be an ace at the game of leadership. If you're ready to rethink everything you know about leadership, if you're excited about accelerating your leadership journey, let's strap in and ignite your leadership potential. Brian Bogert. Brian, thanks so much for coming on The Few with me. I really appreciate it, mate.
Man, I'm excited to jump in today. I know it's going to be a fun conversation. I appreciated just our little bit of back and forth on the pre-show, so I'm sure it's going to be fun and a good one that people are going to extract value from.
Fun. How can you learn without fun? I just feel
That's
like
the only way, man.
in today's world, the fun has been stolen to some degree. Anyway, let's bring some fun into it. First of all, leaders, purpose. You're not only a leader of people. I think you've just got such an inspirational story of self-leadership, leading by example and setting the example. What is it that drives you, Brian, and has you step up into the best version of yourself every day?
Yeah. I mean, this can be a really concise answer. It could be a really long one, but it goes back to what I typically start from whenever I start to introduce myself, which is that I'm a husband and father first. And it's the only thing binary in my world. Now, I say that, and it's very important because it is not only my driver today, but I've said that for 25 years and my actions were not always congruent. And so it's really important to just understand like the full dynamic of all of this. I'll try to compress as much as I possibly can into this so that you can kind of get the full picture. But when I was 7, I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn from my body. It was reattached. I had 24 surgeries. And in the moments of feeling sorry for myself very, very early on, this is one of the first things that shifted into one of my core lessons, is that when all the other families in the ICU were coming up to us saying, we're so sorry for what happened to you, and we find out their kids laying in the hospital bed next to me doesn't know if they're going to live for another 30 days, I was grateful to have my life. But it also allowed me to use perspective and pain to realize that I wasn't going to allow myself to get stuck by the things that had happened to me, but instead get moved by what I can do with them. And I believe that moved people move people. And there's a whole lot that came from that story that came out professionally and personally and in shame and anger and elements within my life that allowed me to experience what suffering really was. But today I live my life with a very clear purpose. It's to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs. And we as a business are on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as we can by reducing the level of suffering that exists on this planet, largely of which exists internal. So I know what it's like to be overlooked, dismissed, disconnected, living in a place where I'm swirling in my shame, flooded in my fear, drowning in my doubt, and completely stuck. I also know what it looks like on the other side of doing the hard work. The work that most people want to avoid, but ultimately is going to give us the most freedom in everything that we do, that has the greatest dividends that will be paid for decades in our ability to get our time, our energy, our focus, and things back. And because I know that perspective, I'm just trying to move as many people as I can, man, into a place of action, into a place of finding and discovering their truth, into a place of healing the things that need to be focused on, and identifying and removing the waste that people don't even know exists within, that's keeping them from stepping fully into who they are.
What I always find fascinating about this show and meeting people is there's a point in your life where it all becomes so crystal clear. And it's kind of hard to express the journey to get to that clarity. Because I imagine the 7-year-old version of you wasn't thinking that at the time.
Not at all.
Unpack that a little bit. Like at what point what were those initial years like? And when you experience such a traumatic event and an event that is going to have no matter how much self-work you do, it's going to be a permanent part of your life. What were those initial years like? How do you get through it?
Yeah, I mean, it starts pretty quickly right out of the hospital. I shared a little bit of my in-hospital experience where I started to shift a little bit of my thought process pretty early, but there was a long journey ahead. And though my life was secure, whether or not my arm would be successfully reattached or whether or not I would have use of it to the function that I do today was completely secondary. And so it was really just focusing on what was in front of me. And, I get out of the hospital and I had a teddy bear in between my arms because my arm had to heal at 90 degrees. So my sling was out, and I always had like a little bit of gravity to me. So people always would come up anyway. And then as soon as they see me cute and I'm hurt, they're like, "What happened to you?" And everybody wants to talk, right?
Is
And this
there
is what
anything a
would
better
happen.
combination than cute and hurt? I mean, God, wow, that's
Right, that's what I'm saying, and then a teddy bear on top of it all, like, in my arm, like, come on, I'm like 7-year-old little kid, right? And so, here's what would happen though, 99% of people would come up and they would ask me, "What happened to you?" And I would look them deadpan in the eye and say, "I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn off." And then they would follow with the following 2 things. First, they'd pause, and they'd turn to look at my parents for validation, which told me what? They didn't believe me. They didn't believe my truth that I'm living and existing in. They didn't see me. They didn't understand me. They weren't going to be connected with me. They had no perspective. And then they would follow that through and support it even more. Because then the second thing they would do is they would start to view me through their lens of what they'd be capable of in my situation, immediately limiting me and telling me all the things I was and wasn't going to be able to do for the rest of my life. And so those early years were really foundational in both a focus on the physical healing, which took almost all of the focus because of the extremity of the pain in my body and all of what had to be redeveloped. But it also went into, like, I was told that if I had a good mindset, if I was mentally tough, then I would be okay. So I literally used that as my entire focus. If I can be mentally tough, I can go and do whatever I want to do. And I did just such. Here was my mindset. Brian's good, Brian's strong, Brian's capable, Brian can do anything himself. And that largely was true. I proved that to a lot of people for a lot of years. I realized that those next 13 years after the injury were as much about proving it to other people as it was about proving it to me.
now there's something in that story, isn't there? It's kind of like the people that don't sort of fit exactly into the mold of everyone else learn a particular type of resilience
Yeah.
and a self-dependency and self-worth that perhaps some people kind of miss out on when they're in this search for purpose. I mean, what, 22,000 books written on purpose on Amazon. It's clearly something important, and some people find it. And I want to talk about it very specifically because you talk to the point that to avoid struggle, you have to experience pain, or use pain to ensure that you don't embrace a lifetime of suffering. Explain that for a minute, because the world, if you think about it, is quite engineered towards comfort and avoiding pain and the pursuit of
Yeah.
sitting down, doing nothing, have food fed up to you, just like that scene in Wall-E where everyone's just wandering around in chairs and doing nothing. How could pain possibly replace suffering?
Totally. It's easy to describe. And what's actually great about you stopping me where you did instead of having me jump into the next portion of the story was the embrace pain, avoid suffering came from this period of my life, this period right after the injury. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was largely driven by my parents because I was in a fog for a lot of those first couple of years, but they were not. And so the unceasing medical treatments, years of physical therapy, and the reality of it is that both my parents were clear on the fact that the idea of their son growing up without the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering. So they literally willed themselves to do what it took, do what it takes to make sacrifices to ultimately embrace the pain to strengthen and heal me. And so whether it was intentional or not, what they did was they ingrained in me this philosophy and way of living, which is how I approach it with everything. Before I teach embrace pain to avoid suffering in the most simplistic sense for you guys to understand, we have to start by understanding a couple things. One, the nervous system. The nervous system is literally designed and hardwired to anticipate threat, risk to keep us safe, right? And so we have to understand what this looks like because 100 years ago, if we cut our leg or I had this happen, we would probably be dead. But the reality of it is that's not the reality for most of us in this modern world that we live in. And so our world has updated, our threats and our risks have updated, but we've not updated the operating system of our nervous system to keep check with it. And so this whole idea is about using our minds and our emotions to be able to understand, like, what is it that we're really trying to avoid and what are we really working towards? We have to understand pain. Pain's defined as short-term, intermittent, and a direct cause of something, and then alleviated once that direct cause is removed. But then what do? We put adjectives in front of it like we do with everything else that inherently changes the meaning, like acute and chronic. Now, acute maintains the definition, but chronic changes it because it implies that it's no longer short-term and it persists after the direct cause is removed. So let's stop calling that chronic pain and call it what it really is, suffering. We don't want to admit that suffering exists, particularly when it's a direct result of our choices. But the unavoidable precursor to change is acceptance. So until we accept the current state of things, we cannot alter them, right? So what does this concept look like? Well, we can embrace the pain of hitting the gym for 30 minutes a day to avoid the suffering of aches and pains of a sedentary lifestyle. We can embrace the pain of a difficult conversation with a loved one or spouse to avoid the suffering of being stuck in a loveless marriage when we really want love and connection, or frankly, wanting a way out and not knowing how to get there. We can embrace the pain of having our kids throw a fit when we haven't put down their mobile device at the dinner table, to avoid the suffering of years of lost meaningful connection and conversation we'll never get back. As business owners, we can embrace the pain of firing our top salesperson to avoid the suffering of stagnation and losing all our other top talent because they were actually the greatest cancer in our culture. Right? Like at the end of the day, if we really want to become the best versions of ourselves, we have to learn to embrace the pain of doing the inner work, the stuff that we have been told our whole lives to avoid and not even look at, to avoid the suffering of feeling isolation, disconnection, and emptiness that nothing but real human connection can fill. Right? And so this is the concept of embracing pain to avoid suffering, is it's about choosing. Because I believe that we can all choose our pain or our suffering will choose us. I'd rather be the one in the driver's seat.
It's a great point. And I think where people get a little lost though, and I'd love to get your insight on this, is the life of beige and the life of gray, right? Where there's a perception that I'm not suffering and a perception that I'm doing well, yet it's like our soul knows it's not the case, right? And you look at the negativity bias and the fact that, social media channels feed negativity, not because they're feeding you negativity, because you're subconsciously seeking negativity. And negativity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now you had an event, okay? And for someone to have an event in their life, to have the opportunity to step up into that, how does it translate to people that kind of just haven't really had anything good or bad happen in their life? Like, it's like you had a moment of awareness foisted upon you.
It's important. It's important though to highlight that moment didn't give me everything I have today. Right? That moment didn't give me the wisdom, the experience, the understanding, the emotional regulation, the executive functioning, right? The discernment that I have today. It was an igniter, right? It was a point. And so what I often say on the tail end of my story, which is the absolute truth, is like, regardless of the extremities of our stories, every single one of us has unique stories. What's important for you and everyone else listening is that you pause long enough to become aware of the lessons that you can extract from your own stories so that you can become intentional in how you apply them in your life moving forward. But here's what I also know. There isn't a single human being who I've met who doesn't deal with trash from their past. Right? And here's the funny thing. Business owners and leaders most often believe that they're stuck because they have the wrong strategy, they have the wrong tactics, they have the wrong system. Right? But what I know for a fact in working with thousands of some of the best leaders and most impactful people in this world is you're never stuck because of those reasons. They're critically important. Systems, people, strategies, tactics, they're critically important in leveraging and scaling your lives, but they're never why you're stuck. Why are you stuck? You are always stuck in some form or fashion because of the trash from your past. What's the trash from your past? It's the emotional, mental, and relational wealth that builds up over time. It's the emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning that have created a set of beliefs that your life is only further validated. Right? Leaders often focus, right? Many of us who learn to receive love, validation, and connection through performance, it was always contingent upon what we did for other people. So we got conditioned to focus on the external, because if it was about what we did for someone, then we had value, we had worth. Right? But if it's always about external results, it misses the internal trash that's actually holding some of those people back. And so where do we close that gap, right? What does this look like for leaders and business owners? It's over controlling your team due to fear of failure. It's avoiding feedback or holding people accountable because you're afraid of rejection. It's poor communication leading to misaligned goals. It's having your identity wrapped up as the business owner, so you can't ever hire an effective salesperson or a team to go do this for you. You believe you're the only one who can get the job done, right? There's a whole variety of things that get wrapped up in this, but at the end of the day, it is always that hidden trash that's holding people back. And so for me, it doesn't matter whether or not you got your arm ripped off, or whether your dad looked at you so many times when you loaded the dishwasher incorrectly when you were 8, 9, and 10 that you started to believe that you couldn't do anything incorrectly. Or like me, I grew up in a household where there was one right way to do everything, but I didn't always know what that right way was until I got in trouble.
It's so true.
Right? Like, think about all the things that are just little embedded nuances. You know how many times I've worked with people that are like, oh, I don't really have like that much going on. I was privileged. I grew up well. My family had money. I had all these things. And then guess what? What we come to find out is like their dad was actually an alcoholic, and there was all this codependency and all this shame. And this individual was, they uncover a hidden block that they got molested when they were 10, but it wasn't that big a deal because they were told it wasn't a big deal. And again, it can be a little nuance in how someone talks to you, or it can be an actual external circumstance. They hit us and feel the same on the inside. And so, yes, my story's crazy, but that's what I want everyone to understand is, look, the whole old adage is real. Like, the truth will set you free. The issue is that the truth for almost every single one of you is that it's buried in the trash from your past. The question becomes, Do you have the desire and the courage to dig through that trash to find the truth that will set you free?
If you're enjoying the show, I'd just like to ask of you a little favor. We're on a mission here to ignite the world's leadership potential. We need to reach out to as many leaders as we possibly can. So if you're enjoying the show, I just ask you to leave a review, to subscribe, to help introduce this podcast to other leaders to join you on your journey to flawless leadership. We're going to head back to the episode now. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learned today. Please remember, let's ignite a movement of flawless leaders. Subscribe, leave a review. Let's get back to the show.
And the reality is you can feel that, right? Like it's almost like it's not something that you can think yourself to a conclusion. It is a feeling. It is that feeling of fatigue. It is that feeling of worthlessness. It's that feeling of being fraudulent. It is that lack of will to be jumping out of bed
100%.
in the morning. So, and I think that's important for a lot of leaders, because if you look at how the world is structured today, a lot of leadership is get a great mark at school, get good grades, move into a degree, get your honors, get a corporate job, move your way up from law clerk all the way up to partner, and then at 55 years of age, you're so tired you have to resign. That there's nothing else to it. What is wrong with that model? I mean, for some people it works, right? For some people, they do jump out of bed and they are motivated by that. I don't know if I could write legal briefs. Sorry if you're in the law fraternity, you're watching this. I take my hat off to you. That's why we pay you such great money, because you do that.
Yeah.
But also there's a lot of mental health and anguish and suicide rates in these poster child or signature careers that are supposed to deliver you all of this financial worth, and you just kind of start at the cheap spirits on the bottom of the shelf, and as you earn more, you just work your way up. The house just gets a bit bigger, the car gets a little bit nicer, but you kind of normalize and you never really change. How do you break? It's great to take out the trash, but how do you know when the bin's full, or even if you need to take it out?
Well, here's what I would suggest. If you feel any drain, strain, fatigue, scarcity, control, fear, anger, you probably have some trash that's in there, whether you realize it or not. Right?
But
Often
it
anything
triggers
that
an emotion. It triggers a negative emotion.
triggers an emotion. And here's the reality. To your whole point that you even started this on, is there's science that proves it. It can't be an intellectual only process. That was my issue for 25 years. Right? Meaning there's 40,000 cells in the heart. They're called sensory neurites. They're brain-like cells that carry cellular memory. And they've actually shown that if you go through the intellectual process of unpacking the patterns of your past alone, and you don't embody the associated emotions, then those 40,000 cells don't heal, and you'll continue to repeat the same patterns. See, here's the reality. What you just highlighted is the exact thing that I teach, which is we're all born as our brightest, most authentic burning light. And then our parents, teachers, coaches, and employers start saying, you should do this, you shouldn't do this. You should want this, you shouldn't want this. You should live here, you shouldn't live here. You should make this amount of money, drive this kind of car, have this kind of house, right? And should is a shame-based word. It implies whoever you are and whatever you're doing, you're not good enough. So all of a sudden, what do we start to do? We start to make our decisions to live inside this box based on who the world has told us to be, because we believe that that's what's going to make us safe. Because if we can live up to the standards and expectations that have been outlined for us our entire lives, then we might just feel okay. We might feel connected. But in fact, that never takes place, because all we're doing is disconnecting from ourselves, which then in turn creates armor and protection externally, which then disconnects us further. See, the reality of it is here's what we all want. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected. We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected. But the second we don't feel seen and understood and connected, or safe and protected, what do? We protect ourselves. So let's just imagine, right? Whether you're 8 or 9, or you're now 50 and you're just looking at this for the first time, take out that 35-gallon black trash bag, open it up in front of you. This is now your armor. Now the question becomes, how could you properly expect anyone, your wife, your kids, your clients, the people who work for you, your business partners, your parents, to see who you are, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, your heart, your intent, your soul, your desire, delivered through this opaque force field? And that's assuming they're not carrying their own. That's going to further dilute the message. See, at the end of the day, the second we protect ourselves, we guarantee we will disconnect ourselves from the two things we want most, which is to be seen and understood and to be connected, which means that we also guarantee that we're going to disconnect ourselves from who we are and what we want. So here's the reality. The greatest amount of resistance and interference typically comes in our lives between a gap or a misalignment between our intellectual and emotional narratives, or between our intent and what our lives and lived actions actually communicate. And so what you're talking about is this paradigm to have people recognize that, one, they can give themselves permission to step into their own voice, and they can start to look at what they want for the very first time. I'm working with a client right now. He runs a $50 million logistics company, right? But here's the reality. even though he did buy the company legitimately because his dad and his uncle were the ones who created it, he feels all this imposter syndrome and all this shame, and yet it's blocking all of his creativity. So we've started to remove that, and he's now launched 2 new brands that are e-commerce brands in this logistical company that have already created a huge impact in new revenue and a new trajectory for the company that will create it sustainable. Guess what? For over 3 years, he couldn't get there until he cleared out the truth behind what was standing there today, right? I've got another client I was working with this morning. This woman is incredible and dynamite, but she's going into a meeting to negotiate around 3 different contract terms, and she's getting all anxious, and all this anger and frustration is coming up. She's feeling defensive because these people are attacking her capability and her capacity, when in reality, she way over delivered. So what did we actually break down? She was reacting to the cells that activated that reminded her of the time when she was 12, when she wanted to actually show her creativity, and her entire family of lawyers told her that it was never going to work for her, that she'd never have a future, that it wasn't going to provide, that she was that person reacting to having to justify her value her entire life, when in reality, she'd already delivered it. And so it was about separating so she could go into this meeting neutral and diffused, because she doesn't have anything to justify, protect, or defend. So how do people break the pattern? It's by making a choice, right? I'm a big believer that we can choose the change we want, or we can choose to change when we don't want change. Either way, if you want to be the one in the driver's seat, it's up to you.
Now, I want to, before as we wrap up here, just explore something very quickly. I presume life for you isn't all rainbows, butterflies, and bumblebees, and that there are times when you find yourself, through no fault of your own, living in contravention to what your beliefs are. And I certainly have that myself when you talk to people around trying to help them with clarity and to separate the logistics and logic part of life and the feeling part, and then you find yourself operating in contrary. This is not a moment in time where you make a decision to take out your trash, to flip the lid, right? This is a sustained mindset. And so if you could just help us a little bit with how a leader can, because I think what sometimes happens is people have a breakthrough and they live this new life, and then all of a sudden, like 2-3 years later, it's like, oh, well, I seem to be back to where I was. How do you make this a sustainable practice and a way of living?
By committing to it like anything else, and it becomes easier and easier over time, and you spend less and less time in it. But you're right. There is no final destination. There's constant evolution of self. And here's the truth. I can only be as self-actualized and aware as I'm capable of being in this minute, but that can change 5 minutes from now. It can change 5 days from now. It can change 5 years from now. Right? And so if it's not about judgment, because that's the place most people fail, most of the time when they make a choice to become more aware and start to own more of these things, it comes from a place of shame and blame, which lowers our frequency and and blocks off growth and opportunity. Right? And so if we can do it from a place of witness and curiosity, it also doesn't have to be so painful to do the work. But here's the truth. When I was living in shame and anger and so disconnected from it, because when I shut off physical pain because it exceeded my ability to cope, I shut off mental pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain for 20 to 25 years and didn't realize it, which meant that I had to unpack all those years of pressing down all that pressure that I didn't even know was building up, but it was blowing up in my face, right? And I had to be able to actually attach to those things and understand. And again, all we can do is attack layer by layer. For every associated layer of pain, whether it's the look our dad gave us when we loaded the dishwasher incorrectly, or the trauma that takes place in any given moment, for every layer of pain, we develop an associated layer of armor. So it's about identifying the source or sources of those pains that you're conscious and aware of right now, and attacking the ones that you're aware of so that you can shed the associated layer of pain. 1, you get lighter every layer you shed, and 2, you get more clear on the deeper levels of source. And so what happens is I used to spend months and years in shame and blame. And then it was weeks and months. And then it was days and weeks. And then it was hours and days. And then it was minutes and hours. And now it's minutes and moments. See, once you do the work and you start to understand and connect the patterns, and also able to separate yourself from the shame and blame in the moment, you can really start to see things through a different lens, because it's a process of flipping the lid consistently. It's a process of truly making sure that we're always showing up as our best versions of ourselves. And yes, also still taking ownership for where we fail on that. Right? And does this happen still? Absolutely. Right? I can have a moment with my kids. I can have a moment with someone that I have an interaction with, and my energy might not be as aligned and intentional as I want. And whether I created damage or not, I still can proactively go back and say, hey, if you picked up any negativity in that interaction, or if I came across in a way that I wasn't clear, I just want you to know what was going on. I was coming from a place of stress, and it had nothing to do with you. Right? It's literally being able to be so clear that I have nothing to justify, defend, or protect in any category, which is what truly allows us to be free. And that's what I'm trying to encourage for each and every one of you is, though there's no final destination, we can show up and be as aware and intentional as possible in every given moment, as long as we're able to also be in the moment and learn and receive the feedback from every moment.
Awesome, man. I feel like we've just cracked the lid. We haven't flipped the lid here, but we gotta keep it on the commute here for 30 minutes. I get it. I get the idea based on our conversation. You know how to pack a mean dishwasher as well, Brian. So we look forward for some tips on that. But thank you for your generosity today, and also personally, thank you for your commitment to continuing to learn and grow from the experiences that you've had in life, and the generosity for you to just come on here and share it with everyone of my listeners here. So, Brian, if you're looking to reach out to Brian to flip the lid, take out your trash, and the practical tools to live an intentional life. Intention's great, but you've got to do it. All of Brian's links are below in the show notes. Make sure you review, share, and continue to support the podcast. Leave a review so we can have more great guests like Brian. Brian, thank you so much for coming on The Few and helping our leaders. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend.